I'll bring this meeting to order. And before we start, I'll read the land acknowledgement statement for the town of Smith Falls. On October 14th, 2021, we acknowledge that this sacred land on which Smith Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smith Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. Item number 2 on the agenda, approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion? Moved by Jack, seconded by Wendy. All in favor? Carried. Item number 3, adoption of minutes. Planning Advisory Committee meeting, September 29th, 2021. Moved by Jay, seconded by Jack. All in favor? Carried. Disclosure of monetary interests. Public meeting, none. Item number 6, priority issues. Do you want me to read them all, Mary, and then you can just carry on from one to another?
If you'd like, or you can introduce each one, entirely up to you.
Well, I think if I read them all and then you can just carry on from one to another.
Sounds good.
Okay, item number 1, report PAC-21-18, site plan control application, SB-21-14-17-23, Beckwith Street North. Item number 2 is PAC-21-19, site plan control application for SP-21-17, 44 Chambers Street. B-20-07, Percy and Lyra, request to modify discussion. 4, report PAC-21-20, validation order, 221 Lyra Street. And item number 5, draft approval plan and zoning bylaw amendments, additional residential units. Mary.
Perfect. So we'll start off here with application for site plan for 17 to 23 Beckwith Street North. So we've seen this before through a minor variance application. So the current property comprises a single-story commercial plaza known as the Rideau Heartland Center. The owner is proposing to construct a second and third story addition to the building to house 6 two-bedroom residential units. So in July 2021, the Planning Advisory Committee approved a minor variance to accommodate this development, which reduced the minimum residential parking space requirements from 1.25 spaces to 1 space per residential unit. So through that variance, the applicant acknowledged that 3 of the residential spaces would displace existing off-street commercial parking, and accordingly proposed that he enter into a cash in lieu of parking agreement that will be administered during this site plan process. So the development has been designed to comply with all other provisions of the C1 zone. So key aspects of this proposed development for the committee's consideration is that the addition will actually be in 2 levels, where previously we reviewed a concept for 1 level. So the second story is proposed to be L-shaped. So it'll have the appearance of a partial story from Beckwith Street, and the third story is proposed to be a partial story entirely near the rear. So it'll look as though it's 1.5 stories at the front, but it'll look like 3 stories at the rear. Each unit will have a private balcony, and there'll be a total of 6 two-bedroom units. Parking will feature 6 parking spaces on the subject property and an additional 3 spaces on the directly adjacent property. A new stair/fire escape is proposed from the 2nd story to the parking area to accommodate emergency exits. Facades will feature red brick with beige accent and upper level cladding with with black. Now, we don't have precise colors and materials at this time as they were not indicated on the plan. So as part of the interdepartment review, staff will be looking for clarification on the precise colors and material for the facade as noted, the intention of accessibility improvements, as well as confirmation that grading changes will not negatively impact neighboring property owners. So at this time, we're welcoming the committee's comments and feedback on this application to incorporate into staff's comments from this round of commenting for the application.
Wendy?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. A couple of things I thought of as I was going through it. I like that the signage is not going to be backlit, and it appears from the mock-up that it will be gooseneck, and the signboards would fit in terms of the design we're trying to achieve downtown. This building doesn't really fit aesthetically into the space, so this is going to be a great addition to make it more aesthetically pleasing on that street. I wondered if there was there's still going to be commercial on the first floor. Is that right? Well, what I would consider the first floor.
Yes, so it would need to be commercial to comply with zoning.
Okay, so that being the case, Mary, is there any opportunity either at the side or at the front entrance for an accessible, I know it's steep there, so it may not be possible to do a ramp at the front door, but is it at all possible to have a ramp at the side door to access the commercial with an accessible entrance? That would be one thing I would hope we could achieve. Let me see my notes here. Other than that, I did wonder, and we don't know what the materials are right now, but I did wonder if it might be again something that the red brick is quite present downtown and in our town, whether the red brick might be carried up the bump out that they have now, carried all the way up from the front entrance to the top. I do really like the fact that it looks like they're going to have a rooftop deck there, so that's going to really add to it. And other than that, I think this is a great addition. I think it's going to really add to the flavor downtown.
Wendy?
When you were thinking, Wendy, of the ramp, were you thinking like a handicap access?
Yeah, but coming in, I know that's probably not possible at the front because it's so steep, but I wondered if it was possible to get a ramp at the side entrance.
There is no side. There's a rear. Toronto Dominion Bank's right beside it.
Okay, then I'm reading this wrong, John. Maybe
The only place, and I think it would be accessible for handicap at the rear of the lot for a ramp, there's no room definitely at the front.
No, you're right. Okay, so if there's a potential to get to the commercial through the back, and I don't know if that's even possible with the interior that they've got set up. And again, I'm having to look at the plans like this, so I may have misspoke on terms of a side entrance. Yeah, it would be best if we could find a way that commercial could be accessed through an accessible entrance. Because it really, in terms of how this is going to play out, the province has mandated that every business will have to comply with AODA. So if there's a chance to do it now as opposed to trying to cobble something together when AODA comes into place, I think that would be the optimal time to do it.
You know, Wendy, something, I was party to a conversation when this was originally built.
Yeah.
And it was brought up at that time as far as accessibility, that we knew that that would be coming. And the parties, you know, they just went ahead without it. And I think that perhaps led to some of the difficulties in that, in the original business, you know,
Yeah.
being maintained.
Yeah.
But I think from the back, I would feel that there has to be something, but it would have to be, you know, made known through signage, whatever, but there should be able to be accessibility from the rear.
The only other, sorry, Jack, if you don't mind, or John, if you don't mind. The only time that I've seen it done well within the footprint is up at the other bank, the CIBC, how but that's going to be difficult to achieve now that that building is there.
Mhm.
You'd have to rework the front of it.
Yeah,
I don't know
entirely.
if that's possible.
But like,
Yeah.
like the other
Anything
one-
is possible, but
Can I jump in there? And Mary, you can clarify. I think it's 2025 that that's going to be required for commercial. So it's best probably to address it now. And if you can advise on the back entrance, I'm sure the proponent should have thought of this probably. Other than that, the only other question I had was the right-of-way off of William, I think, to get to the back. So there's no concerns there in terms of construction and that type of thing when they're doing it for the property owner that we heard from, I think, the last time this came up. So that was addressed, right?
May I, John?
Thanks, Mary, yeah.
So yes, it was addressed. Basically, it would be an issue between the property owners, but right now this proponent is looking at options to mitigate that concern so that hopefully there's not an occurrence where anybody's property is damaged.
Okay. But I agree with the accessibility portion for the commercial. It you know, it's can't believe we're in 2021, so it's a couple of years away, and it might best be addressed sooner rather than later, especially when they're doing this work. And I would think maybe that at the back end might be the best way to do it, but I'm not an engineer or an architect.
Although that's, John,
Yes,
although that entrance at the front is quite wide, that entrance in, if there's any opportunity there to, you know, angle it the way CIBC has done so that you can get within the footprint, I think the proponent would be well served to try and see if there isn't something we could do, something he could do to make that accessible from the front, because it may impact whatever he's trying to achieve at the back too. Residential, well, that's different, but the commercial is going to be a problem for him in the next 4 years.
might be a problem for a lot of businesses.
Yes.
To be shut.
So
To be shut.
yeah, so this opportunity might just come once without upsetting the whole place later.
So if I jump one more time, and so Mary, I guess this comment, it seems like everyone agrees that that might be a comment that the committee might want to forward when you put your staff comments in at this stage. So
Absolutely. So it is noted. We haven't given our comments yet from this round of comments. So the planning advisory's comments will be incorporated into our all-encompassing feedback to the proponent.
otherwise, it's a great intel, and we want more people to live downtown. We all know that, and I think it's a great project. So,
Just one more comment before we leave this subject, John.
Yeah,
with regard to the lack of commercial space parking at the back of this, because it's going to be shifted to residential, both that building is a block from the municipal lot and about a block and a half from the private lot. So for people who are working in that commercial, they won't have far to go. So I'm not, well, I know we already passed it. So, but just if there are concerns, there is available parking within a block or so.
Okay, thanks. Any more comments? Okay, Mary.
Sorry, John, I would like a motion for that typically. So these motions typically say that the Planning Advisory Committee supports the principle of the application, subject to any comments and conditions, subject to staff, agency, and committee comments and conditions being addressed. So that's our standard kind of motion, but I do need a motion to accommodate it.
So moved.
Moved by Wendy, seconded by Jay. All in favor? Carried.
I do want to thank Lucy Bingley and her committee for upping our awareness of these things.
Would you like me to move on to 44 Chambers now, John?
Yep.
Perfect. So this is also another one that we've seen. So this is for a vacant parcel, roughly 2,002 meters square, located on the northwest corner of the intersection of Chambers and Bay Street. So currently this property contains a seasonal chip wagon and associated parking and seating area. The owner is proposing to construct an apartment building on the subject property containing 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. So on September 29th, the Planning Advisory Committee did grant a minor variance to the parking requirements for this development. So parking requirements were reduced from 1.25 spaces per unit to 1 space per unit. That notice of decision has been circulated to participating parties, and the appeal period is scheduled to end October 25th, 2021. The development has been designed to comply with all other provisions of the C115 zone. So for the committee's information, we've highlighted key aspects of the development. So the apartment building proposed is to be 4 stories in height and consist of 28 units. There will be 21 one-bedroom apartments, 6 2-bedroom, and 1 3-bedroom. Each is proposed to have a private balcony. There will be a communal laundry and universal washroom available on the ground level, just off of the heated garage. 28 parking stalls in total, split between an outdoor parking area and an indoor parking area, 2 of which are proposed to be accessible. The building is proposed to be accessed from 4 separate locations: a front vestibule facing the intersection, a rear vestibule, an entrance from the parking garage, as well as a stairwell access on Chambers Street along the western facade. There's several trees and shrubs proposed throughout the site for screening from the street and neighboring properties, waste receptacles and enclosures situated just off of the parking area. And the facade is proposed to consist of white James Hardy board for the upper level, deep wood James Hardy board below the windows, charcoal accents, and then facade to consist primarily of beige colored masonry along first 3 levels facing the street. So staff have provided feedback to the applicants in this case on this original site plan submission. Suggestions and clarifications for the submission were with regard to needing further details for the western elevation facing the parking area, suggestion of off-white instead of using white siding, just to give it kind of a cleaner appearance. Inclusion of evergreen trees in the landscaping plan. We recommended a mix of tree species along the street lines. Details for vegetation reinstatement within the town road allowance, as there currently is none. We're also looking for any details on ornamental features such as benches, as well as any opportunity for murals, public art, or strategic lighting. And there was additional service details also needed by Public Works. So at this point, we're just looking for any further comments that the committee would like to give staff to communicate to the proponents. And I suppose I didn't touch base on the most important part, or one of the most important parts. This is proposed to be a fully affordable building.
Wendy,
No, I think staff's covered off the most of what I would have liked to see. There's just one thing I was a little wondering about, Mary, is why off-white as opposed to white? Is it felt that it would be too stark? It's difficult to tell from the, I'm just thinking that is across from some of our biggest, most beautiful houses. Kitty corner to that one block there. I forget what they call that block. Maybe Jack, would you remember, or Jay?
Frost Mansions?
Pardon me?
The Frost Mansions?
Yes, those. And so some of those have this crisp white trim. And I'm just wondering why you thought white, would it make a building this size look too stark, or would it make it look crisp? And you can't tell because the colors aren't, it's just a mock-up that we have, so I can't compare one to the other. But
So it wasn't personally my comment. What I can say is that the idea of it being off-white instead of, as some of us call it, an office glowing white, is that it looks cleaner. It's easier to keep clean, so to say, so you don't have to clean it as often because dirt isn't as apparent.
okay, well, I think maybe not a bright white, but something like a winter, what women who shop and know these things, like a winter white. But not on the beigey side, more on the whitey side. But again, if we saw what the color palette looked like, that would perhaps change your minds or ours or the proponents. That's the only comment I had. Other than that, this is a great, I can't wait till this thing's built.
thanks, Wendy. Jay,
Yeah, I certainly agree. And I agree with staff's comments too. And I don't need to see the color palette of off-white or white. I think it's going to be just fine. From what I look at the report, it looks great. And the vegetation that we've talked about before in terms of the parking spaces, it's going to be what an improvement to that lot right now. And again, just like the last one we talked about, there's more people living downtown and now it's affordable. So win-win.
thanks, Jay. Jack,
Sorry?
do you have any comments?
No, I'm in agreement with everything there, and I'm with Jay. The color doesn't really enter into my thought here.
Okay. So do you need a motion now, Mary?
I do, please.
Can I have a motion? Moved by Jack, seconded by Jay. All in favor? Carried.
All right, so this next one's a little bit of an interesting circumstance, and I'm not sure how many of you have come across this before, but as you may recall, we had granted a consent decision earlier this year for file B2007 for a vacant parcel of land on the west side of Percy Street between Lyra and Ross. So essentially what we have here is a legal letter from lawyer Craig Halpenny, who states that at that time, even though the two parcels were registered separately, the property was actually legally one. So the committee's decision had stated that a vacant parcel would be severed for the purpose of a lot addition. But what will actually be needed in order to register the consent is a motion to sever a single property off of the one property that was there because it wasn't actually two lots. So I sent out a little bit of an email. I gave you an outline of what our previous motion looks like. So just to give you an idea, it said we would sever 1,140 meters square of vacant parcel of land for the purpose of a lot addition to the westernmost property at the intersection of Percy and Ross Street. So in fact, what we do need is permission to sever 2,736 meters square with 46 meters of frontage along Percy Street in order to get that proper lot configuration and allow for this to be registered on title. So the Planning Act does accommodate amendments to consent decision under subsections 5323 and 5324, as well as 5325 of the Planning Act. So due to this being minor in nature and it essentially having the same result, Craig's opinion is that no further notice or appeal period would be required for this change, but it is necessary in order for the development to proceed on 2 separate lots. Staff did speak to Craig and we did agree with that rationale. So we are of the opinion that we do not need any further notification periods, as ultimately the end result is the same. We will get 2 lots of 2 comparable size and the same development is being proposed for those 2 lots. But in order to accommodate this, we have to look at the procedural bylaw, and what the procedural bylaw states is whenever there's new information that comes to the table, the committee is allowed to reconsider, provided they rescind the previous motion at a 2/3 majority vote of the quorum present, and then we would have to pass a motion.
I see no problem with it. Wendy?
No, neither do I. I was gonna say, so Mary, is the motion to rescind motion that was made on March the 8th, 2021, and do we have to state what the motion said? Do we have to read that all out?
So you don't need to read all of it out. You can say that we're rescinding motion PAC 2021-04 for application B2007.
Okay, then that's exactly what I will move. I've had some experience with rescinding, AJ, so I'll go ahead and rescind this one.
Second, Jack will second it.
Yep.
All in favor? Carried.
And now you need a motion
Need a
to
motion.
replace that one.
That's correct. And I did send a recommended replacement motion earlier for the committee's consideration.
Jay moves, I second.
Okay. All in favor? Carried.
We're just moving right through, aren't we?
It's good.
It is. So the next is a validation order. I will admit that this is a little bit over my head, but I gave it a shot at writing it. So essentially 221 Lyra Street is intended to be sold. During the process of that sale, it was discovered that this property was at one time part of a combined lot, which is identified as Part 1 and Part 2 on Registered Plan 27R8470, which is now municipally what we identify as 221 Lyra Street and 223 Lyra Street. So what's happened is that the first transfer to occur from that initial lot occurred on August 6th, and the transfer reads that there was a consent granted from the Corporation of the Town of Smith Falls with no condition, but no certificate of consent was endorsed on that transfer document. Now, I looked up a little bit of the history of that lot. In 2004, there was quite a bit of activity that was happening in that area. The property was initially at the beginning of 2004 subject to 2 separate plans of subdivision. So it was Plan 186 that was deemed to not be a plan of subdivision in June 2004 on the basis that the development just didn't proceed in accordance with the plan, and instead the development had proceeded in accordance with Plan 22029. So that plan still stands, I understand, to that subdivision location. So the owner, though, is now in the process of trying to sell the property, and the lawyer had reached out to staff to try to find this certificate of consent that doesn't seem to be endorsed on the transfer. And I was able to locate some evidence that this consent had occurred, but not the actual certificate of consent that is needed for the transfer document for the sale to be closed. So the lawyer acting on behalf of the intended purchaser did advise that the previous transfer on the subject property requires confirmation that it is not in contravention of the Planning Act prior to being able to sign off on the Planning Act statements to complete the transfer. So they've actually extended the sale till October 15th to accommodate processing a validation order to clear up this issue. And then there's just directing policy highlighted for you there, so you're aware of the permissions under the Planning Act to conduct this. Oh, and just
Wendy?
so the committee's aware, sorry, I would say that these two properties have been treated as two separate entities for quite some time. As far as the municipality is aware, there's two separate property identification numbers and two separate roll numbers, and these properties have been treated as two separate entities as long as I could go back anyways.
Wendy?
Yeah, I support staff's recommendation. This looks like they just need a remedy for what seems to be an inadvertent error back when this subdivision started. So no, I support staff's recommendation to validate the legal status of 221 Lyra with a certificate of validation.
I did that plan in there, and I can remember that old plan, 186, and that new plan, like, there was a lot of mix-ups in there.
So I endorse staff's recommendation and get these people what they need to. There was obviously confusion, eh, John, at the time.
Yeah, big confusion. Okay, can I have a motion then to move ahead with this? Moved by Jack, seconded by Jay. All in favor? Carried.
All right, last one. This is most of a discussion topic. So what we have in front of us is two draft amendments, one to the town's official plan and one to the town's zoning bylaw. So as you know, we are actually in the midst of conducting a comprehensive zoning bylaw review. And this is one of the items that I believe it was council, maybe it was housing advisory, that was asked to be fast tracked as part of that overall comprehensive review. So we're looking to add permissions for additional residential units within our OP and zoning policies as of right. And we're just right now trying to hash out some draft policies in order to host a public meeting in November. And we're looking for the committee's feedback on some of this draft policy.
Wendy?
It gets a little bit confusing, but for the most part, it's just swapping out secondary units for additional residential. The only question I had, Mary, more out of curiosity than anything, is in LU-2.17, when it says additional residential units will not be counted in the calculation of net residential density. What does that mean?
So we have, as you might be aware, we calculate density for different forms of development, usually larger developments, not something like single family home. So the official plan is essentially reiterating, because additional residential units are only permitted in single family dwellings, townhomes, semi-detached. So essentially 1 unit buildings on a freehold lot is permitted to have additional residential units, up to 2 per lot. And what it's saying is that we won't calculate density for those forms of development, which is pretty typical. We already don't look at density for single family homes or townhouses because it's a single unit on a freehold lot.
Okay. Other than that, I don't have anything to add to what you've got here. It's basically just a change of terminology.
Mhm.
Anyone else? Any comments?
Yeah, fine.
Jay? So do you need a motion for this, Mary?
I don't need a motion. I just want to make sure that, because I know there was quite a few items that I posted to the website. I wanted to make sure that everybody had a chance to review the zoning bylaw amendments portion as well.
Yeah,
I think the same goes there. It's more terminology than anything, Mary, so.
Right,
see
and I
someone-
mean, they've
is it-
added another section, but it's, again, it's just more speaking to the particular provisions.
Is the comments that I see addressed to you and Carl from the consultant that's working with you?
So yes, actually, that's funny that you say that because I actually gave you one of the earlier versions. It's not far off the new version that we got. So you shouldn't have actually seen those comments, but most of those have been addressed.
Okay.
But no harm done by you guys seeing it.
I suggest you use another highlighter instead of blue.
I will
Yellow,
let them know.
yellow would be better. It makes the black stand out.
If you print it out, it is very hard to read.
Oh, it's a blur, look at that.
Yeah.
So no other comments? Everybody's in agreement here?
Mhm.
All right, you have nothing else, Mary?
No, that was it. You guys went through that really quickly.
I thought it was
Okay,
gonna be a big agenda too. I thought we'd go a while, but this is good.
Right, yes, that's what I thought as well.
moving on to item number 7, correspondence, we have none. Project updates, we have none. Next planning meeting to be discussed.
Yes, I was hoping that the committee wouldn't mind discussing that. So our next meeting, the second Thursday of November, is actually scheduled on Remembrance Day. I've gotten a bit of consensus back by email as to which day works better, but I was hoping that we could kind of solidify a meeting date, rather November 18th or November 25th for the month of November.
Either's fine with me.
The 18th suits me better.
Okay, 18th's good for me.
Forget what I told you, Mary. Was it the 18th or the 21st?
I believe you said that the 25th worked best for you, Wendy.
Because I have other meetings, just. Well, I'll be, sure, make it the 18th then, if that's best for everybody, and I'll try to work around it.
I don't have a problem with either day.
Did Jacqueline reply?
I'll reach out to Jacqueline and ask her what her preferred date is so that I can ensure that there's a quorum. I'll also see if I can reach out to Bill and see if he'll be able to attend.
Okay. Do I have a motion for adjournment? Jay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See you later.
Have a great
Good
night.
night.
Bye.
Bye.
Early night, Mary.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Thanks, Mary.